A 10-year-old migrant child from Nicaragua was lost and later found walking alone in a rural part of Texas near the border. Let's watch.
¿Ah?
¿Me puede ayudar?
¿Qué pasó?
Es que yo venía con un grupo de personas y me dejaron botar y no sé dónde están.
No sabes dónde están. ¿Te dejaron solo?
Pues claro, me dejaron botar.
¿Te dejaron solo botado?
Solo.
¿No vienes con mami o con papi o con alguien?
¿Ah?
¿Vienes con tu mamá o tu papá?
Nadie. Yo venía en un grupo que venía de entrega con usted y al final me dejaron botado y venía aquí a pedir auxilio.
¿Te dejaron botado y te dijeron que vinieras a pedir auxilio?
No, yo vengo porque si no, ¿por dónde me voy a ir? Allí voy a dejar y tal vez me pueden robar, secuestrar o algo.
¿Te pueden robar? ¿Tienes miedo? Ok.
Sí.
Ahorita hablamos, ¿ok?
Jeez.
So authorities said that he had fallen asleep and the group left him behind. And so he woke up, obviously, he's a 10-year-old, just absolutely terrified. And I'm happy that he was, found. And the report says that he's now safe, but remember, he's going to be passed off to Health and Human Services, where currently there are 19,000 unaccompanied migrant children in federal custody. And we've shown you what those detention centers look like. They are overcrowded. The children are sleeping on the floor. They have those foil blankets. It's an awful situation. And there has been a lot of pressure on the Biden administration to act and to act now. And of course, that 10-year-old boy is not an exception to what we're experiencing at the border right now. For instance, on Monday in California, Border Patrol said it rescued two children, a 6-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, who were dropped over a rocky area of the border and left. The children found near this area had a handwritten note that included their mother's name and phone number, and also had the same information written on their forearms. I shared that with you because they are being sent to the border unaccompanied because their parents are desperate. Their families are desperate. They want to get their kids to safety. And so they do so knowing that there are sponsors or family members within the country. Oftentimes, they come to the border with contact information. And there just needs to be more resources at the border to get these children in contact with their family members or their sponsors in the country, so they're not in these disgusting, filthy facilities. With that said, though, John, Biden has blamed the Trump administration for ignoring the root causes of the migrant crisis. And I think that as much as I despise Donald Trump, as much as I find him deplorable, the fact that he took children away from their parents at the border as they were seeking asylum, he is a special brand of monster, there's no question. But with that said, to blame that on Trump alone, I think is ridiculous, especially as Biden's State Department continuously embarrasses itself with a continuation of the same policies and the same talking points that led to the migrant crisis that we're experiencing at the border. And I'll give you the details on that, but I wanted you to jump in.
Yeah, and this is a message that you've been delivering consistently for a few weeks now, this criticism of him on the border, and you're 100% right. And then we see, well, some of these gaps in the wall, they might end up being completed under Biden. Because that's not like one of the things the American people were most singularly against during the Trump years. Though they might end up getting completed under Biden. I'm sure we'll end up talking more about that in the future. When I watched that video, I'm assuming you feel what I felt. I'm seeing people in the chat. It's devastating. You want to help the kid instantly. You worry about how is this experience going to impact the rest of the kid's life, and depending on how the kid is treated once they're brought into one of these facilities, there's a lot of potential lives that could result depending on the choices that we make as a country. Will we make the right ones? Probably not. And we're having this debate nationally about this issue, but it is so disconnected from any consideration like what's gonna happen to that kid. What life is that kid gonna have? It's, like it's betas like Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz riding around in speedboats with machine guns wanting to pretend that they're tough guys. It's right-wing talking heads thinking, oh God, that stimulus bill seemed really popular. We need something to hit Biden on. So let's talk about the border, but not actually talk about the people at all. It's just frustrating that this is such an inherently human issue that has so much of its humanity drained out when talked about by most of the politicians and the commentators that actually engage in it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the disingenuous nature of the Republicans, people like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham going to the border and pretending to be concerned about the safety of these children. I'm not buying it when they were the very people who defended Donald Trump as he was ripping children away from their parents at the border as they were seeking asylum. They have no leg to stand on. And obviously their calls for banning abortion in order to protect children's lives is also incredibly disingenuous. And I mean, look, Republican hypocrisy, political hypocrisy is as American as apple pie. It's not even an interesting talking point or point to bring up at this point. But with that said, I do want to get back to, Biden's statement about what Trump did as if he bears no responsibility. Keep in mind, I mean, Biden didn't just arrive to the political scene a few years ago. I mean, he's been a lifelong politician, first elected into the House, then he was a longtime senator, then vice president, and now he's the president of the United States. He has held positions of power for decades. And he knows very well how US foreign policy has impacted migration throughout the world. And so to say that it's Trump, he's not addressing the root causes, I think is pretty pathetic. So let's take a look at what Secretary Anthony Blinken had to say about the outcome of Bolivia's democratic election. They did have a democratic election after the Organization of American States, a US-backed organization, essentially orchestrated a coup in Bolivia and overthrew Evo Morales. Okay, so that happened. And then there was an unelected right-wing government led by this woman named Janine Áñez in place. She led a bunch of massacres on communities there, indigenous communities and supporters of Evo Morales. Dozens of people died as a result. And so luckily the people of Bolivia managed to fight back against that, have a democratic election. And now Luis Arce from the MAS party has been elected. He's in the same party that Evo Morales was in. And so luckily democracy won in that country. It's important to understand that context because after the election, Janine Áñez got arrested because she committed crimes by being the leader of that coup and by massacring people. Dozens of people died because of her. And Secretary Anthony Blinken wanted to weigh in on it and said this: we're deeply concerned by growing signs of anti-democratic behavior and I can never say this word, I'm sorry.
The politicizing of the legal system, I always say.
Yes, the politicizing of the legal system in Bolivia. The Bolivian government should release detained former officials pending an independent and transparent inquiry into human rights and due process concerns. What? Okay, we want to look into human rights abuses when someone who committed massacres, someone who was not elected, put herself in the position of the president of that country and then proceeded to do massacres. We want to look into how her human rights were abused because she was arrested. No, it's the same. It's a continuation, guys. It's a continuation of the same garbage US foreign policy that leads to this migrant crisis. And it's not just Bolivia, it just goes on and on and on. Same with Venezuela. Biden will recognize Juan Guaido as Venezuela's leader, top diplomat says, but Juan Guaido wasn't elected. Juan Guaido tried to orchestrate multiple coups in Venezuela and failed. And who the hell is Joe Biden to be yeah, who cares about what the Venezuelan people want? They haven't had an election to elect this guy, but the United States believes that he is the rightful leader of the country. That headline comes from Reuters, and I want to go to the next graphic so you can see what section it was listed under. Emerging markets. Emerging markets. That's what it was filed under over at Reuters. I wonder why. I mean, US business interests have been massacring countries, especially Latin American countries, for decades. And then, they turn around and say like, oh, Trump needs to address the root causes of mass migration. No, I think you need to address it, Biden.
Exactly. Yeah. No. And look, they're addressing the human rights. They're just doing it one person at a time, starting at the top. I guess. In terms of the foreign policy, though, comparing the Biden administration to the Obama administration, it seems like so far, I don't know what would have been different if you had just taken their team then and brought it here and presented them with the current geopolitical situation we have. I feel like these moves would be exactly the same. The difference is that we do have better people in Congress trying to do the right thing. Like there's, that group of 80 Democrats who put out the letter in the last day trying to pressure Biden on the Saudi blockade of Yemen. And so they're good on some of these issues. The question is going to be, does it actually count for anything? Is having them in Congress actually going to produce a foreign policy that's less internationally corrosive under Biden that we saw under the Obama administration?
So far, Biden's foreign policy has been a continuation of what the US government has done under several administrations. It's not a Democrat versus Republican thing. The State Department under Obama, awful. State Department under Trump, awful. Biden's awful when it comes to Iran. We're the ones who assassinated their general. We're the ones who pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, which was one of the best achievements of the Obama administration, right? The Iran nuclear deal. And Biden's like, I don't know, maybe we need some more concessions from Iran before we re-enter that deal. What concessions? What concessions? They even decided to abide by that deal after the US pulled out of it. When it comes to China, the Cold War rhetoric coming from the Biden administration. Look, China is currently, and I don't care what anyone has to say on Twitter about it, what paid off mouthpieces have to say about it. There are human rights abuses in China, and we should acknowledge that. But that doesn't mean that we should use increasingly militaristic language against China. Doesn't mean that we should engage militarily. It means that we need to, first of all, we need to work with China diplomatically if we want to do anything on climate change. But the other thing to keep in mind is we also engage in human rights abuses in this country. And the second thing to keep in mind is that our government has always used accusations of human rights abuses to engage in wars, whether it's a Cold War, an actual war, with weapons and boots on the ground, because it's all about moneyed interests at the end of the day. And China is about to be the top hegemon, and the United States is not comfortable with that. That's at the heart of what we're hearing with the Cold War rhetoric toward China at the end of the day. And this is all stuff that ends up hurting us in the end. So again, when you see migrants at the border, it's not something that's happening to us. It's something that we played a role in. And when I say we, of course, I mean the US government.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.